2 years later, radiocarbon dating tests would reveal their ages. Some of the skeletons were 8 to 13,000 years old, around the same age as the Kennewick man found in Washington state. Though they looked like these skeletons, they were among the oldest skeletons ever found in the Americas. At least 5,000 years too old to be Mayan. Scientists call them pre-Clovis. Author and anthropologist George Erickson calls it the time of Atlantis. Erickson believes these skeletons could be survivors of Atlantis.
This skull is dociocephalic. It is long-faced. It's not a round skull with a flat face, as we would expect from a Paleo-Indian. It is possibly European, but much more likely it is a member of the peoples who were here 10,000 years ago, after the demise of Atlantis.
For Erickson, it all fits. A 10,000-year-old skeleton with features that are definitely not those of an early Central American native. Different building styles from the earliest to the most recent Mayan ruins. Ancient sculptures of men with beards and mustaches. The Mayans didn't have facial hair. Sculptures of people foreign to the Americas 2,000 years ago. These are the pieces of unexplained history that challenge traditional archaeology's view of early civilizations and convince investigators like Erickson that there was not only a continent called Atlantis, but survivors who left their own clues to show us they were here. There is one final piece of evidence that George Erickson believes is perhaps the strongest of all. Legends passed down from one generation of Central and South American natives to another.
The Mayan myths describe an arrival by sea for the foundation of civilization. The Inca myths of Kon-Tiki and Viracocha describe an arrival by sea for the foundation of civilization. And the Egyptian myths describe Thoth coming across the oceans from the west to establish the arts and skills of civilization.
It's the same kind of story that University of Veracruz anthropologist Roberto Rodriguez documented in his book Atlanticus.
Los niños estaban atrapados por aquella maravilla de escuchar esos relatos y del cuidado que se debía tener con la naturaleza.
Natives he interviewed told Professor Rodriguez the story of a society that sank beneath the waves because the gods were upset with their greed.
Por aquella maravilla de escuchar esos relatos y del cuidado que se debía tener con la naturaleza.
Erickson believes there's truth in such oral legends or myths.
Myths could be collective memory of real events. Pretty experiences wrapped up in a story that can be told and retold from generation to generation.
But Dr. Gary Feynman, curator of the Department of Anthropology at the Field Museum, says there's not enough evidence to change his mind about who built the Mayan ruins.
We know that throughout the course of history, civilizations, urban centers rise and fall over and over and over again. That's been a repeated pattern in the history of humankind over the last thousands of years. So that part of the Atlantis story, I don't have a problem with. But when you say that that collapse led to the roots of early civilizations across the globe, I think that you're beginning to be on very dangerous ground.
The debate between mainstream scientists and those who search for Atlantis won't be over soon. George Erickson isn't budging on his position.
The discoveries we're making around the world confirm that there were a very different people in the Americas thousands of years ago.
Greg and Laura Little believe there were survivors too. They've written about it in one of their books on ancient civilizations. They're trying to find evidence of possible descendants walking the Earth today by using an ancient form of DNA called haplogroup X.
Basically what we've done is we have looked at all the mitochondrial DNA research that's come out to date In all the 42 known types of mitochondrial DNA, still, even today, haplogroup X is a type of DNA that proved that all Native Americans did not come across the Bering Strait in 9500 BC.
The interesting thing to us was that it turned up in the same places that Edgar Cayce said that the Atlanteans migrated. For example, the Basque people, the Iroquois on the eastern shore of North America. There's a little bit in Central America, some in South America, and also a little bit in the Middle East as well.
As the search for Atlantis continues, an ocean engineer has found what looks like the remains of an ancient city 2,000 feet below the water off the shore of Cuba. The search for Atlantis has been going on for more than a century. Is there a lost civilization buried somewhere under the ocean? The evidence that it did exist is there to the believer, but a mere mirage to scientists. Only Plato knew for sure.
I don't think there is any real Atlantis, but how do people take generic elements that are combined into a myth and then look around for those generic elements? Well, that's not hard to do. 1,000 years from now, someone may pick up a copy of The Wizard of Oz and then go into Kansas and look for houses which have storm cellars. There's no doubt they'll find a house with a storm cellar in it. They might even find a house where there's a kid named Dorothy living in it. The mistake would then be to extrapolate from that kernel of truth that there had been Munchkins, that there had been an Emerald City, and so on.
Yet it's difficult to deny the Emerald City when someone is always finding remnants of scarecrows and tin men. In 2004, a team searching the waters off Cyprus found what they believe are the remains of an ancient city. The location, they say, fits 60 of Plato's clues. Another site getting a lot of interest is off the western coast of Cuba. While looking for sunken shipwrecks with sonar, ocean engineer Paulina Zalitsky and her crew found what looks like an ancient city, 2,000 feet underwater. Cuban archaeologists and anthropologists who've looked at videos of the structures say they've seen symbols and inscriptions. A robotic submersible will be used to get a better look. The site is 90 miles away from the Yucatan, where George Erickson is looking for descendants, and 130 from the Bahamas, where the Edgar Cayce Foundation and the Littles are conducting their search for the lost continent.
I'm convinced, as are many others, that Cuba is going to probably hold the key to the whole mystery. It was almost everywhere. That's the problem. It was a maritime island empire, and it probably had a capital which is yet to be found. But an island empire has ports and has cities everywhere. And I think what's being found in coastal India, parts of South America, probably what we're looking at in the Bahamas, what's been found even in the Mediterranean and parts of it, and along Spain and France. I think that's all Atlantis.
Probably the city of Atlantis was just a story invented by Plato to prove a point. But buried underwater, there almost certainly are artifacts and sculptures from ancient cities we still know nothing about. If they are not from Atlantis, would that really make them less significant?
We don't care what it's called. We don't care if it fits exactly what Edgar Cayce or Plato says about it. But just were there people traveling worldwide over the oceans at that time? And there's a lot of evidence that they were.
I think it's important that we should study ancient cultures. It seems to me a terrific thing. Some of our own material prosperity is being used to expand human knowledge. I think Plato would approve of that. But he was telling a morality tale. He coined the term Atlantis. He created this morality tale for a very straightforward purpose in order to talk about what he liked about the real Athens and what he didn't like about